Question period. I recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this tired and out of touch government has lost the plot, Mr. Speaker. They're more focused on Photoshop photos of meetings that didn't happen than they are on actually taking care of the things that matter to people. Things, Mr. Speaker, like health care and education and the cost of living. Now, the Premier has the power to offer families relief today if he wanted, Mr. Speaker. The question is, why is he choosing not to? Why won't he give Saskatchewan families a break at the pump?
Hear, hear. Recognize the Premier.
Speaker, as I've said many times on the floor of this Assembly, there's $2 billion in each and every budget, Mr. Speaker, and those remained in this budget that was introduced a couple of weeks ago by this Deputy Premier, our Deputy Premier, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Speaker, included in those affordability measures are measures that have increased the number at the level of income at where we pay income tax in Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker, over $20,000 higher than in Manitoba, removing 112,000 people from the tax rolls, many of them low-income people, Mr. Speaker. And I would say that that matters in the affordability matrix of people in this province, Mr. Speaker. Certainly what we won't do, Mr. Speaker, and what we won't do is support the Trudeau government, like the NDP do, on the number of policies that they have brought forward that are increasing the inflationary pressures for not only Saskatchewan, but Canadian families, Mr. Speaker. We will not attend a Trudeau campaign school to ensure that Mr. Trudeau can stay in power to enact more of those policies that are, quite frankly, hurting Saskatchewan and Canadian families, Mr. Speaker. And so it is only due to the strength of a strong and growing and prosperous economy that we are able to keep those affordability measures in place here in Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker. And happy to say with some news releases today that the strength of that economy is really showing through comparatively to other areas of the nation.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier's desperation continues to show, and no wonder, because this tired and out-of-touch government is failing to deliver on the cost of living, Mr. Speaker, and they're also failing to deliver when it comes to health care. Now, today, Mr. Speaker, we're joined by the Weber family. Zach is 15 years old, and he has a chronic immune condition in his esophagus that causes inflammation and constriction in his throat. And like many kids in this province, he needs to travel out of province to get the treatment that he needs from a pediatric gastroenterologist or a pediatric GI. Again, Mr. Speaker, this family has to fly to Toronto to get the care that should be available here in Saskatchewan. What does the Premier have to say to this family about the ongoing shortage of pediatric GIs in our province?
Good question.
Recognize the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I would welcome the Weber family, Zach and his family, to their Legislative Assembly, Mr. Speaker. And I'm certain that the Minister of Health, Mr. Speaker, would be happy to sit down with them and discuss their specific situation, Mr. Speaker, and if there's anything, links that he can make within the Saskatchewan Health Authority to help with that situation. I know that he'd be more than willing to create those avenues, Mr. Speaker. We have Saskatchewan has long-standing agreements with many other provinces for services that may not be available on a temporary or permanent basis here in the province, Mr. Speaker, that we have agreements with other provinces where we will compensate those provinces for the services, Mr. Speaker. What we have done over the last number of years is expand those number of services, in particular pediatric services offered at the Jim Pattison Children's Hospital, Mr. Speaker, which is a good environment to attract physicians into with their association with the College of Medicine, Mr. Speaker, and the research opportunities that are there. However, when it comes to pediatric GIs, Mr. Speaker, the Saskatchewan Health Authority, through the HHR plan, the Health Human Resource Plan that we have, is working very hard to recruit 3 pediatric GIs into the province, Mr. Speaker. My understanding is they have 2 that are very close to finalizing some contracts, Mr. Speaker. And it would be our hope that they'd be offering services within the province, Mr. Speaker, sooner rather than later.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Saskatchewan people, Saskatchewan children, should be able to get health care in Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker. It's as simple as that. And this Premier's failure to hire and keep health care workers in our province is driving more people away. The last pediatric GI closed their practice in 2023, leaving families like Zach's without access to care. And again, they're now forced to fly to Toronto to access care that should be available here at home. Is it okay with the Premier in any way that this family is forced to spend thousands of dollars to fly out of province when we have a children's hospital in Saskatoon that isn't being fully staffed?
Recognize the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, no. Well, certainly that's why we've invested heavily in a health human resource plan here, Mr. Speaker, that is bringing physicians, nurses, medical professionals to communities right across this province, and yes, is active in recruiting specialists, not only to the Jim Pattison Children's Hospital, Mr. Speaker, but to other major urban centres as well. Mr. Speaker, I failed to mention in my first comments that in addition to the Saskatchewan Health Authority being very close to finalizing 2 of these contracts and working hard to find and recruit a third pediatric GI to the province so that we can offer those services in Saskatchewan. What they have done in the meantime, Mr. Speaker, the interim time, is they've secured a rotation locum pediatric GI specialist that is on a rotational basis attending to a number of cases here in Saskatchewan. I know the Minister of Health can have more detailed information on this in a subsequent meeting with Zach and his family, Mr. Speaker. But most certainly it is the intent of this government, and that's why we're making the investments to ensure that we have pediatric GIs to offer those services to families like Zach's, Mr. Speaker, for years into the future.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, I'm not sure the Premier understands the timeline here. Since that Human Resources Plan has been in place, we've lost 2 pediatric GIs and have none in the province right now. But this isn't just a health care issue, Mr. Speaker. It's also a cost of living issue. Zach's family has applied to Telemiracle and to Hope Air to cover some of the costs, and they're thankful for that support, but they're left paying out of pocket, Mr. Speaker, for the rest. Now, the Premier likes to talk about how affordable life is here in Saskatchewan under the Sask Party. What does the Premier have to say to Zach's family, who are paying thousands to access health care in Toronto that should be available here in Saskatchewan?
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and welcome Zach and his family to their Legislative Assembly here this afternoon. I've received an email from Zach and his mom and dad, Alyssa and Mark, and I've read through that to better understand his circumstances and their circumstances, and I'd be very pleased to meet with the family here after the proceedings today to talk further about Zach's case. Mr. Speaker, as the Premier mentioned, this is a priority for us as a government. We're working very hard through the SHA, through the new Health Recruitment Agency as well, using every avenue we have to try to secure pediatric gastroenterologists here for our province. This is a subspecialty that is in great demand, not just here in Saskatchewan, but across Canada, and I've asked our teams to make sure that we put our absolutely best foot forward when it comes to making sure that we have salaries and benefits and incentives to attract those specialists here that we need, to make sure that we have a fully staffed pediatric gastroenterology program at the Jim Pattison Children's Hospital as soon as possible, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Regina Welsh Acres.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Webbers leave for Toronto, their second trip there on May 7th. And they don't know what to expect when they get there. All that they know is that Zachary is going to eventually need surgery. It could be this visit, or they could be sent home and told to make a third trip to Toronto. They've exhausted Telemiracle, Hope Air, and frankly, a family shouldn't have to crowdsource so that their sick kid can get health care. Will the minister work with the Webbers and ensure that Zachary gets the health care he needs?
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll meet and sit down and meet with the family after the proceedings here today to talk about their journey so far when it comes to Zach's medical care and the care that he requires for his quality of life, Mr. Speaker. We'll have a look at everything that's been covered thus far, either through provincial government programs and services and additional options here as well through charities and other organizations. Mr. Speaker, I would again just reiterate how important it is for us. And I've had the opportunity to meet with other families as well across this province who have raised concerns and know how important it is that we do have a fully staffed children's pediatric gastroenterology care unit at the Jim Pattison Children's Hospital, Mr. Speaker, and I am confident through our teams that we will hire those to fill those vacancies as quickly as possible so that children can get the care they need as close to home as possible.
Recognized member from Regina Walsh Acres.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, the Webbers are traveling 2 provinces over for health care that they should be able to get here at home. They live in Saskatoon, home to our province's own children's hospital. But due to this government's failure in recruiting and retaining pediatric specialists, our own children's hospital can't see our sick kids. Last time that we brought this up, Mr. Speaker, on April 10th, the health minister said that they had doctors interested. 2 days later, they reposted 2 pediatric GI positions on Sask Docs. To the question to the minister, how many kids are being sent out of province due to this minister's inability to recruit and retain pediatric specialists?
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My understanding when it comes to pediatric gastroenterology is that the SHA is currently negotiating on a couple of contracts for pediatric gastroenterologists, and as soon as those contracts are finalized, we'll make sure that the public is aware of that, and we'll communicate that publicly. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we are working to fill vacancies across this province, and that includes in pediatrics, and not just specifically at the Children's Hospital, but there are some other vacancies that are temporary right now in other parts of the province. Mr. Speaker, the last time I checked, there were 14 pediatrician vacancies. That's pediatricians across the province, Mr. Speaker, including 4.5 vacant positions at the Children's Hospital. However, I would say that 6 of the 14 positions are in the active hiring in the process right now, Mr. Speaker, and we hope to have those filled as quickly as possible.
Recognize the member from Regina Walsh Acres.
Mr. Speaker, with so many vacancies at our Children's Hospital, it makes you wonder how many more kids are being sent out of province for care that they should be able to be getting here at home. How many more families like the Webbers, like the Sorens, are forced to pay out of pocket to ensure their kids are safe and healthy? And what happens when those out-of-province hospitals can't accept any more of our kids? Zachary was originally referred to Calgary and Montreal, but just like our own Children's Hospital, those hospitals weren't accepting Saskatchewan sick kids either. What is the minister going to do when Toronto can no longer take our sick kids?
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and that does speak to the challenge that we see nationally right now when it comes to recruiting and training and hiring pediatric specialists of a variety of areas of subspecialties, not just in Saskatchewan, but of course in other provinces as well, Mr. Speaker. As I said previously, the SHA is my understanding is very close to and is in the process right now of finalizing contracts with 2 pediatric gastroenterologists. Mr. Speaker, I would say this is a significant priority for me as the minister, for us as a government. I have had the opportunity last month to meet with the new head of pediatrics for Saskatchewan, Dr. Terry Clausen, and I will be meeting with him on a regular basis. I have a meeting set up with him next week. This is one of the items that I have brought to his attention. He has expertise being involved with the Children's Health Program in Manitoba. He also has experience at the Stollery Hospital in Edmonton, and I'm confident through Dr. Clausen and his team at Pediatrics that they are going to do everything they can to fill the vacancies we have, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Mr. Speaker, this government is absolutely failing the people of Saskatchewan on health care, and they're doing no better when it comes to transparency and accountability. Yesterday, when we asked about this government's decisions that led to a lucrative tire contract going to an American company, no one from that government wanted to touch the question. Barely a peep from the Premier. And no one made available to the media for questions out in the rotunda after. And I can understand why, Mr. Speaker. The California-based company that got the tire recycling contract hired former Finance Minister Kevin Doherty as their lobbyist and ended up with the contract. Did the Minister of Environment ever meet with Mr. Doherty on this contract, yes or no?
Recognize the Minister of the Environment.
Speaker. The answer is no.
Recognize the member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't get to say this very often. I thank the member opposite for the answer. Mr. Speaker, the Sask Party wants to push this all onto the Tire Stewardship Agency, the TSS, but it's the Sask Party government that's responsible. The regulations are clear. It's that minister who's responsible for the recycling program in the province. She should be able to answer questions about the changes made to this government, to the rules that led to the contract going to this Newport Beach, California-based company, which led to a net loss of Saskatchewan jobs. How did we end up with a contract that sends value-added manufacturing out of Saskatchewan to other places? Because the TSS report laying out the business case for this is fully redacted, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear.
Recognize the Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tire Stewardship of Saskatchewan is an industry, retail-led, independent board. Both northern and southern tire recycling operations were chosen through an RFP, Mr. Speaker. There you go. The southern processor was chosen through a legitimate, bona fide process. What the member is actually talking about, Mr. Speaker, they're belittling the fact that this CRM was chosen over a few other proponents that responded to the RFP. CRM has an outstanding reputation within the industry, Mr. Speaker, and we appreciate the economic over $10 million of investment by this particular company and employment of dozens, or if not 15 or 20, employment benefits that they bring to the community of Moose Jaw, Mr. Speaker. CRM was chosen through a process that is...
I recognize the member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Well, the minister was answering a question I didn't ask. She has 100% contradicted what the Premier answered yesterday on who applied for that RFP. It sounds like there wasn't one applicant. It sounds like there was more than one. Mr. Speaker, people deserve answers about how this deal went down, and my question was about the business case for breaking this up between a southern and northern regions. We haven't heard anything about that, especially when they see a former Sask Party finance minister registered to lobby for the California-based company that got the contract. The lobbyist registry shows that Kevin Doherty started lobbying for that company back in 2022, right at the same time that this out-of-country company got the contract. Why did the Sask Party make the changes that led to that decision? And what role did Mr. Doherty play in pulling the strings?
Hear, hear.
Recognize the Minister of Environment.
That's weird. Oh. Mr. Speaker, those members opposite and their crackerjack research is over there. Tire Stewardship 2022 annual report. It's all hidden in an annual report. TSS Board of Directors approved a motion to proceed with negotiating a contract with CRM as a southern processor for the province on June 6, 2022. Now, I'm actually not talking to you. Mr. Doherty was not hired by CRM until November 2022.
Recognize the member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Wow, Mr. Speaker, there are so many unanswered questions about this deal. Why did the province choose an out-of-country company at a time when a Saskatchewan-based recycler operating here in Saskatchewan existed? What role did Kevin Doherty have in bringing about the changes that led to this deal? And why is the minister pretending she's no control over the file when the law is clear who's responsible? When, Mr. Speaker, will the minister shed some light on how yet another contract ended up going to an out-of-province private company with well-connected former finance minister for a lobbyist? Why, what, when? Will the minister answer today?
Hear, hear.
Recognize the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite just has it completely wrong. There are two RFP processes, one for Southern, one for Northern. The Southern one is what you are talking about right now. It went through an RFP process. The proponents who responded to that RFP was chosen through Tire Stewardship of Saskatchewan. The government of Saskatchewan had no involvement in that in choosing the proponent. Obviously, the economics made sense. The investment that was provided to the City of Moose Jaw surrounding area and the jobs in southern Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker. The process, you say 1 minute, go to RFP, don't use the RFP, and that there's something wrong with it. We've had enough of you.
Recognize the member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Mr. Speaker, what was the business case that led to the decision to post those two RFPs? What was the business case? The minister is responsible. What was the business case? Because the report is fully redacted.
Recognize the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, the decisions made by the Tire Stewardship of Saskatchewan are exactly that, Mr. Speaker. They're the ones that decided how to divide up the province, that it was obviously something that industry-led board decided to do, Mr. Speaker, and I don't know what the member is getting at, but Mr. Doherty was not hired by CRM until November 22. Couple months later, couple months earlier, that's when they were awarded the contract, Mr. Speaker. It's absolutely ridiculous what's going on over there.
Recognize a member from Saskatoon-Meewasin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. People in Saskatoon have a lot of unanswered questions about that shady tire deal, but everybody I talk to knows that this education minister has got to go. This minister has sown chaos in our classrooms and has overseen more cuts to per-student funding and the longest teacher job action in Saskatchewan history. Wow. It's time for this minister to resign. Why won't he do that today?
Yeah. Recognize the Minister of Education.
You know, Mr. Speaker, as I said yesterday, when the NDP don't actually have real criticisms of policy or decisions, Mr. Speaker, they get personal, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the record of the NDP while neighbouring government in terms of their investments in education versus the record of this government when it comes to investing in pre-K to 12 education, Mr. Speaker, it's two totally different stories, Mr. Speaker. We have an NDP that closed 176 schools, Mr. Speaker. Meanwhile, on this side of the House, we have a government that has invested in over 100 major capital projects all around the province, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they fired 400 teachers during their time in government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just in the last 5 years, Mr. Speaker, we have hired over 850 EAs. We hire more support staff. We hire more teachers every year, Mr. Speaker. This is a government that invests in education, takes it seriously, Mr. Speaker, compared to the members opposite.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Centre.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the overdose crisis continues to take lives in our province. We set a record for overdoses last year, and we're on track to set another grim record this year. The vast majority of these deaths are Indigenous peoples, even though we are only 17% of the population in this province. We need more access to supports that incorporate Indigenous ceremonies and Indigenous worldviews to keep people alive. When will we see a plan from this government to offer those supports and expand them, like the supports at Poundmakers Lodge?
Recognize the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've said many times in the House, the Mental Health and Addiction Action Plan that we unveiled last October is one of the key pillars of the plan is to expand capacity by more than 500 treatment spaces across the province, Mr. Speaker, including inpatient treatment including outpatient treatment. We have detox spaces. We're going to have transitional or supportive living spaces, Mr. Speaker. 500 additional spaces added to the province, to every corner of the province, to address the needs of individuals who are battling addiction across the full continuum of care. Mr. Speaker, those spaces, some of which have already been announced at Poundmakers Lodge in North Battleford, Mr. Speaker, offering an Indigenous perspective from addictions treatment, Mr. Speaker. We are now making it easier for individuals to access those spaces, and we are wrapping supports around individuals, meeting them where they're at, Mr. Speaker, with a recovery-oriented system of care focused on treatment and recovery so that we can save lives, heal families, and strengthen communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.